This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 149 of Linux Dev Time. I'm Joe.
I'm Monolith.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Andy.
Good to talk to you all again. We had such a good time doing hot questions a couple of episodes ago. I thought, let's do it again. So, the first question. Which color scheme is best? And related, should code highlighting show syntax or control flow and async information?
So it should be a dark background. There should be plenty of contrast, and that's fine. Like, what I can't deal with is these like soft color schemes that are like, oh, it's easy on the eyes, as in I can't see.
I agree with the dark background part of it. I switch between color schemes pretty frequently. They're all dark variants. I think right now, actually, I'm not even sure. I'm on a Tokyo Night, I think. And that and like other variants of, I don't know, Nordic and I don't know. I kind of like those ones. The high contrast part, I think too high contrast and it starts to feel to me like light mode would, but that's not one that I think I over rotate on. So for me, as long as it's a dark mode one, I can usually get on with it.
I have used way too many color schemes over the years, and I go through way too much effort to try and make all of my applications the same theme. I make my own Firefox extension to make it look right. I make a Vim color scheme. I change my X resources. I try and maybe even come up with a GTK theme. I'm working on a GTK theme for Dracula Buffy right now because that's the primary color scheme I'm using. But in the meantime, while I'm working on that GTK theme, I use one of the Everforest variants because I like the soft green colors.
You know, Amalith, you could just use Emacs and never leave that for anything, and then you could probably get that same sort of effect.
And no matter what color scheme you used, it would be as ugly as sin, so it wouldn't be any point.
Text UIs are not always the greatest.
I'm curious what you two think about the second part of the question, though, whether or not syntax highlighting is for like keywords or control flow. Because I don't know that I have a strong opinion there.
I use syntax-based color schemes just because they tend to be the best. I haven't found any other highlighting schemes that I really like yet.
I'm very used to having the keywords and stuff highlighted, and I didn't really think much about it until I watched my kids learning to code Python. And I discovered that they like really watched for the color to change to know whether they'd typed the right keyword and stuff. And actually it made a big difference to them, which was the first time I thought, okay, this is potentially useful. So I'm not too passionate about that when I'm writing code, but I'm really passionate about it when I'm writing a blog post or making a presentation. I'm explaining code. I just think syntax highlighting is useless in a blog post because it's just noise. What you want is to highlight the thing you're talking about in the text around it. So I'm very passionate about let's not have any syntax highlighting, and whatever code block I'm using on my blog is got to let me highlight bits in different colors or bold or whatever to say this is the bit that you should be looking at in this massive blob of code. Because whenever I look at a blob of code on a blog post, my eye immediately skips over it and I just start reading the text afterwards when actually I was supposed to read the code.
Yeah, I think the only preference I've had here is that I've used some color schemes before that want to like highlight everything.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, oh no, it's only, variables and keywords and primitive data types. And like by the time you get through it, you're like, oh, just everything is highlighted. Got it.
And if everything is highlighted, nothing is.
Exactly. So I've tried to shy away from those styles and just have like keywords and strings potentially. But the other thing that I do actually like is I like when the comments are more muted, whether they be like a gray or they kind of fade in the background a little bit. I prefer that so that the code is highlighted over the comments. And ones that are the reverse of that scene where the comment is, the big thing that jumps out to me, that's kind of silly.
But I think it's a really interesting idea that I haven't really explored of whether we could use color while we're coding for other things that would be more useful. Like, I'm always banging on about how the question mark in Rust is too subtle, so we could make that really stand out by doing that. But also for async and stuff like that, sometimes it's quite hard to understand what's really happening. So if the colors could show us things like that, I would be really interested in that, but I've never tried it, and I don't know of anything that provides it.
I think it was a blog post I read about different highlighting approaches like these. I haven't found or used one yet.
There was a plugin called Rainbow Brackets or something that would use color to match different pairs of either parentheses or brackets so that you could see like, oh, the red bracket on this side, you just look for the red bracket on the other side so you could match them up. I found that useful before. I don't really use it anymore. I'm sure it matters which language you're using as to whether or not that's helpful or not.
Sounds potentially useful. I think we'd have to be really careful that we didn't start relying on things that excluded people who are colorblind from any of these things that we were doing. But for like personal use, I guess that you're picking the right thing might be helpful. I did see an editor that showed different indentation levels in Python in different colors and thought that was pretty useful.
I think Zed has a setting you can enable that does that as well, and I have it turned on because I like it.
All right, what code pattern do you follow that everyone should follow?
Now, what kind of code patterns are we talking about here? Because if it's like the builder pattern or a factory pattern, I think those are all very situation dependent. But if it's something like Dry or Yagni,
I think this one's open to interpretation.
sure.
So do you follow Dry or Yagni, Emily?
I don't know. I think it's a balance. Sometimes it's better to copy than prematurely make an abstraction. Sometimes you know you're going to need that abstraction for sure.
Is this because you primarily write Go?
Yes.
Where you have to copy and paste everything. This isn't the direction I thought this question was going, but I'm actually a big proponent of Yagni. You ain't going to need it, right? Like, I think that I really like test-driven development, and that really encourages you to just code to solve the problem in front of you and then think about the next thing later, because it normally turns out different from what you're expecting. So when you start over-engineering the thing, then you've written this whole great thing and it doesn't actually fit the problem.
Yeah, my answer would be not necessarily, I guess, a pattern per se, but doing things like data-oriented programming or trying to use more like structive arrays rather than array of structs, that type of a model for processing lots of data. That's one that I wish I'd learned about sooner and now tried to incorporate, where appropriate pretty often. And I don't see it used, I think, as often as it should be.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't use that at all, but I think these days, especially given there's so many caches and the caches these days are so big and it has such an impact on performance that needs more thinking in that kind of way.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that, like, I guess the way we naturally think about things is different from the way the computer can do it in an optimized and efficient manner. And once you see that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this other problem can kind of be that way too. Like, it turns out I can actually go through all of these numbers really efficiently. So it's one of those ones that I wish I'd learned sooner. And when I get a chance to talk to people about it, it's exciting. So I'm seeing more and more use, though.
Counter to Andy's preference for Yagni, have you heard of Pagni with a P instead of a Y?
No.
This is probably are going to need it. And one example is API pagination or API versioning. You're probably going to need both of those if you're building an API. You should build that in early. Or maybe localization. That is very hard to work into your application way down the line. And it's easiest to integrate something like that as early as you decide you might need it later on.
You're right. There's some things that are really hard to retrofit, and it's really good to think about them early. And so if Yagni's leading you to not implement features that you wish you'd implemented later, then I totally agree. I think that testability is another one of those things, right? And especially things like clocks and or random numbers. If you write your code using a real random number or a real clock, then try and fit being able to test that in somehow later. You're going to regret it. The pattern that I was going to advocate for is much more simple and direct, which is that when you're writing a command line program, you should gather all the stuff that's like command line arguments and config and stuff like that in as short a piece of code as possible, and then call a function, which is a testable function because everything that's getting passed in is something you could substitute for some kind of fake version of it, and then you can test your main code.
All right. What is the best coding font?
I've actually gone through a whole bunch of different fonts before. I'm sure every developer does. I have been on one called Fantask, I think is the name of it. And I've been on this one for several years now. And I just really like how it makes the like lowercase k loopy. Mm-hmm. There's no other, like all the other stuff is what I would say pretty normal. It supports font ligatures and things, which I really like. But outside of that, I don't know why this one font has just stuck with me. But that's the one that I would say. I've also used some things, I guess, like Fira Code and what are some other ones that I've used? But Fira Code and Fantask are probably the two that I've always been on the longest.
And when you say ligatures, do you mean things like if you put like equals greater than, it turns into an arrow and stuff like that?
Yes, exactly. It'll turn into like a fat arrow or There's a whole bunch of different supported ones, but yes, I enjoy that.
I cannot stand that. That is the only thing that would... I was about to say I don't really care what font, but like I cannot stand it changing stuff that I type.
I wonder if I'm using like the nerd font that adds those ligatures or if it's the base font that has the ligatures. I don't actually know now.
I have opinions about font features and their implementations, such as ligatures, but beyond that, it's just personal preference. You pick whatever looks pretty to you. Pick whatever you don't mind staring at for 8 hours a day.
So, monospace or not?
Definitely monospace.
Oh, for code, monospace for sure.
Definitely monospace, yeah. My basically, I really resent having to spend time on like fonts or colors. Like I just want something that looks fine enough. And so I go for Ubuntu Mono because I was using Ubuntu and got used to Ubuntu Mono. And I actually resent the fact that I have to do some fiddling around to get the right theme in my NeoVim setup, which I can't even remember what I did, but I wrote it down somewhere. But yeah, just a font that doesn't kill me, and now I don't have to think about it anymore.
For a long time, I really enjoyed using a monospaced serif font because monospace just refers to the spacing between letters. It doesn't actually refer to sans serif versus serif. It's just convention that most monospace fonts are also sans serif. The serif one I used was called Triplicate, and it's a paid proprietary font, but it's really, really nice.
That makes sense for you, Amalith.
The one I use now is called 0x Proto, and it does have ligatures, but because I share the same opinion as Andy, they don't do the same thing as most other ligature implementations, where most other ligature implementations might change your two characters into a composite. If you, for example, type greater than or equals, an implementation like this might turn it into the Unicode greater than or equal to symbol. And I don't like that. What 0x Proto does is it reduces the space between those two characters, and I think they touch a little bit, but not very much. They still look distinct. They're just much closer, so you can tell what you typed.
Right, I don't know if I could live with that or not. Like, I really like them to just look how I typed them. But yeah, I do think that the serif font makes a lot of sense for you, Amalith, because you're a bit fancy.
You know what's funny is my silly Texas brain always thought that the serif and like sans serif, I was like, what are we talking about? Something from like the desert? Or like, I don't know what this is.
Serifs are the tails at the entrances and endings of some letters.
Oh, I just looked it up. The other font that I used for quite a while was called Inconsolata, and that one does not support ligatures apparently. So Andy, maybe that's one you could give a look.
I've heard of that one, and I convinced myself that it might be acceptable to me, but then I had to like download something or something, and why would I do that when I could just be coding right now?
All right, two related questions. Does the keyboard you code with matter? And if you were paid $1 million a year but had to do all the development on a flimsy keyboard through RDP over a high latency link into a Windows Notepad.exe, how long would you last? So first of all, does the keyboard matter?
Yes, insofar as it shouldn't cause pain. As long as it doesn't cause pain while you work and is comfortable, it's fine.
I also agree that the keyboard does matter. It matters, like there is, I would say, a spectrum of matters, right? I can work on a bad keyboard for quite a while, but a good keyboard is far better. And I don't just mean like it sounds nice to type on or whatever, but like I've found that using keys in like particular layouts and, you know, split keyboards and things, because I have particular medical issues in my wrists and fingers, that it makes a measurable difference on my enjoyment of the day and what I can produce during the day. So that is like, it does make a big difference, but I can also program on an absolutely terrible keyboard so long as my fingers fit on the keys. That's probably the number one thing. I'm not going to do all this on like a mobile phone. That's ridiculous.
Well, speaking of small keys, can we just take a brief moment of silence for Andy's dead GPD Pocket 2?
Oh, it's so sad.
And you used to sit on the train banging out code on that tiny, tiny laptop.
With an excellent keyboard.
Excellent keyboard, really?
Yeah, I love the keyboard on that thing. I don't know why, because it is really small, but it's one of the kind of 3 keyboards in the world that I find really comfortable and really like using.
Right.
If my hands are touching, I can't do it.
The keyboard I use is really important because coding makes me feel really nice. And that's what I want out of my day. I want that nice feeling that I made some code. And if I'm on a bad keyboard, I don't get the nice feeling. I just feel frustrated that whenever I try and do something, it doesn't come out right. Especially, by the way, if the control key is not in the bottom left because there's a stupid function key there, it kills me.
The control key is supposed to be where caps lock is, though. I'm confused.
What do you mean? That's where my temporary shift up key is. My one-shot modifier.
As a Vim user, aren't you supposed to set caps lock to be escape so you don't have to stretch?
It's also escape.
But as far as the second part of the question, it's not the keyboard, the flimsy keyboard that would get me unless it was one of these mobile phone style keyboards. If it's outside of that, the high latency RDP link into Windows Notepad.exe to do all the development, I don't think I would last very long at that company. If that was a mandated way to work, I would probably go crazy.
If I had to last the year in order to receive the $1 million paycheck, I would not. But if it was spread out over days, I don't know, maybe I'd last a few days.
So if you got paid quarterly, so let's say, $250 after the first quarter, would you at least last that long?
This is so detailed.
I don't know at that point.
I don't know that I would. That would be pain. I'm assuming too, you have to do a full day of development, right? This is not, you can't just read documents or whatever. You have actual work you have to do. That would be absolutely painful.
This is like a more subtle question, right? Like, if I was working at a normal company and they were making me do that, then I would hate them for it, right? It's stupid. It's just a waste of everyone's time. But if I was like on the moon and I had an environment like that I had to use, or maybe I was controlling software that was running on the moon, I reckon I could make it work. Like, it would be a challenge.
You'd just be less productive, but that would be baked in.
Yeah, exactly.
You say that you wouldn't mind a flimsy keyboard, Kevin. Well, we have cameras on for this show, and I'm now holding up my K400 Plus, which is a Logitech media type keyboard with a built-in touchpad. What if I forced you to use this?
That's almost what I would qualify as a mobile phone keyboard. I know that's nowhere close to a mobile phone keyboard, but that is on the line.
I just got used to them, and I've got 5 now for all my different places where I need a keyboard.
I think this is a particularly important question for someone who spends a lot of time on their keyboard, and it really matters if you get the keys wrong. So using Vim is a perfect example, right? If I miss the key on Vim, my next 20 keystrokes are then just destroying my document in some way, and that is really painful.
Do you sometimes find that you've shifted over by one key?
Yeah.
And you're just pressing all the wrong stuff? Yeah, when I'm editing, I do that. And I started using this Logitech terrible keyboard, and now I'm stuck because my muscle memory means that I've tried with a decent mechanical keyboard, and it's just it just feels all wrong. Whereas this just feels like a comfortable pair of slippers to me, a really rubbish comfortable pair of slippers.
Well, that's why you need to try a split keyboard, though, because if you shift over one, your fingers are on potentially nothing. It's really hard to do that.
Think yourself lucky that you got addicted to a cheap keyboard rather than a super expensive one.
Well, that was somewhat by design, Andy.
I'm sure.
And also, I've got a handy touchpad. Occasionally, the battery in my mouse dies, and I'm not completely out of luck then. I can just use the touchpad briefly. It's a nightmare, but at least it's an option.
I switched to the motion layer of my keyboard, which lets me use the mouse with keyboard shortcuts.
Can we just talk about, I would swap any keyboard for not having the palm of my hand brush the touchpad and destroy what I'm doing.
I agree.
I mean, you can set that in the settings.
Yeah, I've set it in the settings. It doesn't work because nothing works on Linux.
Right.
I have the same problem, and that's why I can't use things like focus follows cursor. It just doesn't work for me.
I love focus follows cursor. That is probably one of the few things I have kept enabled the entire time I have used Linux.
Do you not have a touchpad?
No.
I'm looking at you differently, Emily.
But even when I did, on my little framework laptop, or on the ThinkPad X200 that had no touchpad and only had a nipple, I still used focus follows cursor there.
In this hypothetical world where you're working through RDP with your focus follows cursor, I can also imagine it falling out of the window, and oh man, this just sounds like a nightmare.
I would probably disable focus follows cursor in that context.
I mean, you're on Windows in this scenario, so I don't think you've got the option.
I don't know what is wrong with you, Amaneth.
I didn't realize this was a weird thing.
Don't you end up typing your password into the wrong window sometimes?
No, I move my cursor over the window with the password dialog.
I'm about to scroll through our chat and see if I see any weird characters in there.
I can't understand it because it implies being on the mouse a lot more than I want to be on the mouse. So that's why, like my I don't know where my mouse is, and I certainly wouldn't want to be careful about where it was positioned.
I actually switched over to using a vertical mouse for a little while. And when you mentioned knowing where your mouse is, the amount of times that I would swing my hand over and just like throw the mouse across the room because it's higher than I'm used to it being was pretty substantial until I got used to that.
I think I got used to focus follows cursor before I got used to navigating my desktop with keyboard shortcuts.
Right.
Well, I deliberately use a different mouse for recording versus editing so that I don't have too much muscle memory and too much like repetitive strain. And is there an argument for using a different keyboard every day? Like say you had 5 different keyboards, you wouldn't have the same muscle memory, but then you wouldn't have the same repetitive strain.
I mean, I certainly think there's an argument for sitting in a different position. I definitely sometimes feel like I've done a day's work and then I want to do some coding in my spare time, and it's like I've got to be sitting somewhere different or somehow different.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Amalith.
I've been Kevin.
And I've been Andy.
See you later.